Welcome back, ladies and gents. Then 100,000 kilometers on the BMW. I think the last review I did on this was at 2-3 years ago, and at 56,000 kilometers, 35,000 miles. Now we've just clocked over 100,000, which is about 62,000 miles. Yeah, so let's see how this bike has fared. This is a 2014 BMW R1200 GS K50. So because it's a 2014 model, that means it has the lighter flywheel, which they then stopped from the 2015 version onwards. One of the Achilles heels of this bike is the heated grips. So the heated grips, now that is the only option I actually asked for when I got this bike. This bike is completely stock. I'll just swing down. You can see there's no ESA electronic suspension on it at all. It is completely stock. It didn't even come with hand guards. And when I did get the bike, the salesman said I was the first person in something like 20 years that he'd known that I'd actually got a stock GS. But I think there's some advantages to that, which we'll talk about later. But one thing I did insist on was the heated grips, which was a big mistake because the 2013-2014 heated grips are about as much use as a chocolate fire guard. They're completely useless. They get warm at best. I know they rectified that from 2015 onwards. So if you're looking at a second-hand 13-14 model, bear that in mind. Heated grips aren't that great. They work well in summer, but forget it in winter. Right, let's start off with the engine then. Absolutely no oil is burnt in this motorcycle at all. And I think the liquid cooled 1200s are all pretty much the same. They don't really get through any oil. It's continued to be 100% reliable, the engine on it. One problem I mentioned on the last video that does periodically rear its ugly head is to do with the ECU, and that is the exhaust flow control valve, which lives in there. You probably heard about it. It's that flappy device inside the exhaust that opens and closes. I believe a lot of people, when this has been reported under warranty, BMW simply swaps the entire exhaust out. Now this only started happening to me outside of warranty. How do I combat it? I simply turn the engine off and turn it back on again, and it rectifies itself. Also squirt a bit of WD-40 now and again inside here. That seems to help. It's never prevented me from going anywhere, and to be honest, how often does it happen? Very, very rarely, but if it does, switch on, switch off, and then carry on riding as normal. So I've never had a problem with it. I thought I would have to swap the entire exhaust out by now, but I haven't. And like I say, this is not a regular occurrence, it's very rare, but it does happen now and again. Cooling system. Again, zero problems with that, except initially, again I mentioned this on my other video. I think I'll just try and see so you can see that. You can see this breather hole here. Okay, I mentioned this when the bike was brand new. The water pump, which is behind here, I think the seal on it slightly leaked, and I got a small seepage of coolant. I don't know, get around that way, I can't really see. Small seepage of coolant out of that hole. Again, I know a lot of people took their bikes back to BMW and put it on a warranty claim, and then they changed the entire water pump. I didn't. I just stuck my head in the sand, and basically it sealed itself after a few hundred Ks. Never had any problems with the coolant since then. I've fitted some Wunderlich radiator guards on there just to be on the safe side, as I've got a bit more off-roady. I'm not even convinced that the coolant reservoir has ever been refilled or even flushed for that matter. I'll have to check all the servicing schedules, but no problems with the cooling system at all. Right, moving on to brakes, wheels and tyres then. I did swap the rear disc out at 45,000 Ks, which is 28,000 miles. That was pretty much shot, which sort of links into my complaint. If you watched the last video, I did say that my rear caliper or rear brake seems to eat through brake pads, but that in turn needed, my brake disc needs to be replaced quite early. It sort of negated that because I brought this second-hand set of spoke wheels, and the previous owner didn't do that many miles on them, so the discs were fine front and rear. So I probably would have had to swap out my front disc by now, but like I say, because I swapped these wheels out, they're still fine. Brake pads, yeah, brake pads. Front have always seemed to have been fine. I think I've swapped a couple of sets out. Probably didn't need to do 2 sets, but I certainly have. The rear, I think it depends what sort of you put sintered in, or is it the organic type? I can't remember. That plays a big role, but I still get through rear pads quite quickly. It may simply because I do a lot of, when I commute to work, that's a lot of urban area, so I'm on the rear brake quite a lot. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just my riding style. But yeah, I still get through quite a few brake pads. At about 97,000 Ks, my rear master brake cylinder failed. I actually thought it was my rear caliper binding on the disc. I was riding to work and I could feel my rear wheel dragging. I called for recovery once I'd finished work, took me home, and then I took this round to the dealer, which is luckily just round the corner from where I live. I presumed it was the rear brake caliper had seized, but he actually told me it was the master cylinder had basically jammed or whatever. Now I think you can actually take these apart and repair them. He fitted a new one. I think it was €211, and that to this day is the only time this bike has let me down in 100,000 Ks. And like I said, that happened fairly recently. So when we're looking at tyres then, over the years, I think I started off with the Michelin keys that came with it. Got a puncture with those, then fitted Road Pilot 3s. Both of those punctured, front and rear, and I read on the forums that's not unusual. Maybe excellent road tyres though. I then went on to the Metzeler Torrance X and the Torrance Plus, I think. And now I'm on the Mitas EO7 Pluses. I now believe, for the style of riding I do, which is, we've done quite a few Trans-Euro trails now, still the majority of the times on the road, but I think these are my unicorn tyres. They're absolutely brilliant on the road, very little compromise, but for my style of riding, which is pretty slow and steady, I'm not exactly doing the Nürburgring or anything, these tyres are brilliant off-road and on-road, really, really good, and I'm really happy that I've sort of found them, and they will continue to be my go-to tyres from now on. Okay, talking about the electrical system, I'm still on my second battery. As I mentioned before, this bike is not attached to a charger or battery tender at all. It just sits outside. I think I've had no issues with it simply because I'm using the bike daily, and there's, you know, it's about a 40-kilometre ride to work, so that's 80 Ks a day. The battery's all right, no problems with the alternator or anything. I've had one indicator bulb fail, which sort of brings me back to the advantages of not having LED, because it's pretty simple repair, and 3 headlight bulbs in the 100,000 Ks I replaced, and they cost what, €7 to replace, so that's pretty good. Okay, corrosion. Let's talk about corrosion. So I've told you how I keep this bike. It's kept outside. Yeah, it's starting to show a little bit. So let's have a look. Obviously, if you see down there, the centre stand here is obviously corroded quite badly. So you can see along here, it started to corrode a bit. Underneath, it's quite badly corroded. You won't be able to see that because of all the dirt on it. But yeah, it's a little bit of corrosion there. Yeah, I've seen worse on the UK bikes on the forums, but I guess, I don't know what's that's the salty air. In Germany, I don't think we have that problem as bad. But yeah, generally, in fact, you might be able to see that here. It's quite almost peeling the paint off there. Under here, it's quite badly corroded there. You can see it bubbling, starting to go on the front a little bit. Yeah, so generally underneath, along there, it did actually, back to that control flow valve here, this, when I took it off, funny enough, to oil this up a little bit in an attempt to do a bit of preventative work, the actual mounting brackets under this had rusted away and rotted, so I had to sort of come up with a way. Like that one there, you can see that the bolt's missing off it, because underneath that it's corroded away. This is just held on with 2 bolts. You know, it's not too bad, but it is obviously starting to show a bit of signs of wear and tear. Okay, let's talk about the transmission then. The gearbox itself, I'm really convinced that this has just got smoother and smoother as I've gone along. I mentioned it on the last video that it was definitely smoother than when I first got it. Right now, at 100,000 Ks, it's smoother than it's ever been. It's really good. So I guess they just take a long time to break in, or it could be that I've just learned how to ride it correctly. I don't know, but I'm pretty convinced that is the case. Talking about the shaft drive then, I know a lot of people on the forums are very hot on lubricating, greasing the splines on these. As far as I'm aware, well, I certainly haven't. I've never split this shaft apart and greased any of the splines. I did ask my master mechanic if I should be doing that, and he said do not bother. There's no requirement on these, they're very reliable. Now, some of the forums you'll read will tell you otherwise, but I guess it's up to you. It's an expensive bike. If you want to do preventive care on it, great, you know, good on you. I never did anything. I've had 0 problems with the shaft drive on it. It's also not had, I believe there's a new mod for drilling under here somewhere to let fluid out. I haven't had that done yet, because like I say, I very rarely go back to a BMW dealer because I find the servicing costs pretty high. So yeah, transmission then, no problems at all. Okay, then summarise then, 100,000 kilometres. It's let me down once with the rear brake master cylinder. I can't complain about that. Maybe there's an advantage in having the basic model, because this really is a very basic GS. There's, you know, you're talking analog display, LCD screen, no electronic suspension, 2 rider modes. That's you. That is it. There is nothing else to this bike, and I think that plays to its strengths. You know, and it's been very, very reliable. In the past, I've owned some really good bikes. I've owned the 650 Transalp, the 750 Africa Twin, the VFR 800. I mean, these are all fantastic bikes, but if I'm honest, this is the best bike I've ever owned, and it will continue to be the best bike I've ever owned, I think. Even now, I get on it and I love it. I just think it's an absolutely brilliant bike. If you can only own one bike and you've got the money, I would definitely recommend it. So although I've said all that, I have actually ordered a new motorcycle. It'll be arriving in May. It is not going to be a competitor to this bike. I'm going to keep this bike, so it'll basically just run alongside it. More about that obviously coming up. If you've got any questions, guys, ladies, then please fire away, get them in the comments, any discussions. I'll answer everything you ask and to the best of my ability. Just bear in mind, I'm not any kind of mechanic. This is just my view on my bike. Thanks for watching, stay safe, keep riding, and I'll catch you on the next one. Brother.